What is the silliest reason you've seen someone get offended? My sister was freaking out about Ebola. I told her that the CDC is packed with highly trained people who have determined we don't have to worry. She said she'd read some articles online and that they were wrong. I told her it took more than reading a few articles to become an epidemiologist. She flipped the FCK out and told me my opinion didn't count because I haven't graduated college yet. I was on a ferry with my very cute lap dog. A woman approached me and asked to pet my dog. I told her no. That the dog would bite her if she tried. She reached out to pet the dog anyway and the dog snapped at her. Didn't actually bite but made it clear not to come any closer. She got mad because all dogs love me. This actually happened twice with two separate women in the same ferry ride. In a certain community I'm a part of, there was an Italian guy who was particularly good at what he did. So he got sponsored by a primarily American team. Well, one day, a girl online called him a giraffe and he freaked out as if the girl dropped the most racist, ignorant, offensive comment ever. He ended up threatening to kill her. He also hoped that the girl would get raped to death if she didn't take it back. Well, she leaked the messages to the community that he's a part of. To which he responded back to her with, "If I lose my sponsorship because of her, I swear to God I'm going to fly to America and kill this bitch." He ended up losing his sponsorship and giraffe memes became the highlight of the community for a few days until the moderators had to make them a bannable offense. Good times. I saw a girl go on a Facebook rant one time condemning a cookie delivery company because they gave her an extra cookie and wrote a note saying, "Figured you would appreciate an extra cookie." She went on talking about how she had body issues and this guy company should send her a written apology because of how they were calling her fat or something. The best part is the company responded and offered her a free box of 6 of her favorite cookies. She accepted. I used to work in an Outback steakhouse in suburb of Atlanta. A couple came in and was seated in a booth. Before their server could even take their drink order, I noticed them angrily walking to the door. I asked if something was wrong and they replied, "We refuse to eat in a restaurant with a rebel flag on the wall." Double quote. It was an Australian flag. Edit. Yes. I did tell them it was actually an Australian flag as they were walking out the door, but they ignored me. At that point they were already committed. My girlfriend's mom gets offended if you try to disagree with her in front of other people. She will pull you aside later and try to get you to apologize for embarrassing her so badly. My mom still does that. If my voice so much as fluctuates to an argumentative tone, suddenly I'm yelling at her in public. Luckily my sister and I both recognize it now. So when we're together we can stick up for each other and call her on it. One time someone got offended when I put on my seatbelt. Thought I was commenting on her ability to drive. Leaving aside that it's the law. No amount of driving skill will save you from the fact that you share the road with countless other drivers whose ability to avoid accidents isn't guaranteed. I like to come up with explanations that fit their narrative whenever people come up with dumb shit like the person you mentioned. Told her that her kids would be seated at the kids' table. And she freaked out that they were family members of the groom and shouldn't be shunned. So we immediately said we'd change the seating plans so they could sit with her. To which she got even more offended because she didn't want to spend the reception with a bunch of children and demanded she be with adults only. Someone once got offended that I live a drug and alcohol free lifestyle. We were talking about going out and everything and they made a comment along the lines of, "Well, get so smashed. It'll be hilarious," to which I replied, "You will. I won't." So they looked confused and asked if I had a high alcohol tolerance, so I informed them it wasn't that, but I don't drink. I'm not crazy on the taste of alcohol and after being around it all my life I just don't like it. They seemed a little put back but still okay as they knew that they had someone to look after them if they got that intoxicated. They then threw out something about knowing a guy and I politely passed on that too and told them I don't do drugs either and they acted like I just killed their puppy in front of them. I still don't understand it. I wasn't pushy about my lifestyle, and in fact I like to think of myself as chill about it. I live my life. You live yours, and that's that. If you drink or do drugs, fine by me, but that's to my thing, and yet this person was so offended by the fact that I don't touch that stuff that I swiftly got rid of them out of my life. Last night I took my GFS dog for a walk and saw a young 19-22-year-old guy in shorts and a tank top with a Coke and Henny bottle next to him. In SF this isn't very normal at 11 PM in the sunset. But I usually say hi to folks I come across while on the walks. I said, "Hey. How are you?" He said, "Obviously I'm not alright. Thanks for asking, Dick." I chuckled and walked past him, to which he said, "FCKU." At first I was a little irritated. But I thought about it for a few minutes and I feel bad for the guy. I hope his shit got sorted out. I'd hate to have to live with a personality like that all my life. I had a client who would get offended by something every time we met or had a phone call. It got to where I would just expect a call 45 minutes after our contact. It was always right around 45 minutes later. The issue would be some turn of phrase I used, or some reference I made. Initially this pissed me off, and every so often I would push back. But then I started thinking of what it must like to live in his world, where every tiny contact you have with another person carries contempt or disrespect. I became sympathetic to his condition. But I also dropped him as a client. I'm not a glutton for that kind of punishment. I gave a homeless guy a neck brace outside 7-Eleven the 40-something cents I had left over. And this random dude starts yelling at me from his car. "Save your money. He's a f***ing thief." Shit like that. I'm sure he's just saving up for a beer or some crack or something. I usually don't give money to panhandlers. But I certainly wouldn't blow my top on someone that did. Co-ed exercise facilities were installed at work. Obviously separate men's and women's locker rooms. After a few weeks, I noticed they put up "Do not pee in the shower" signs. They apparently did the same in the women's locker room. That afternoon I overheard a female co-worker complaining that the stick figure on the signs was not anatomically correct for a female. She literally wanted a sign changed to depict an anatomically correct female stick figure urinating in the shower. A guy I was Skyping with while playing League of Legends got inexplicably angry when our teammate, who was also in the call, used cause as an abbreviated form of because. The angry teammate said that we must be mentally retarded if we don't know the difference between cause and cause. As he said that cause can only be used as a verb, like to cause something to happen. He ended up screaming his lungs out when I tried to calm him down. This dude was probably the most toxic and irrational gamer I've dealt with. I asked my stepdad if I could get a New York strip steak for dinner. Growing up I had to check everything I did with him or I would get in trouble. He finds it on the menu and says $19? And he made a displeasing face. So I quickly said never mind. He says what? I said well you made a face so I won't get it. He becomes infuriated and says I did not make a face. He then says I'm leaving and lays his keys down on the table and walks home. That was not the first or last time he left during a meal. He often would call my mother on the walk home and say why I should be punished. Childhood was fun. One time I went with my ex to dinner at BJ's. We were with all her friends because it was one girl's birthday. Fear all SJWs. One of them was transgender. Now, I've known quite a few trans people. And I always try my best to respect them. I met her prior and always referred to her as she, and she even told me and her friends how nice it was to be around a guy that was so respectful to her. But we were eating. And the subject of Daniel Tosh came up. I hate Tosh. She said he was transphobic. I didn't question it. I just asked did he say something in his comedy act? Or something outside of that? To which she replied, does IT matter? Does IT matter that I am always discriminated and people telling me that my gender is not legitimate? She went 0 to 100 and I'm then sitting there. The only guy in a table of 10. with all of these Tumblr cunts with dyed hair just glaring me down acting like I said the most offensive shit ever. And I'm pretty shy. So my anxiety kicked in. I felt sick and couldn't really eat. Just asked a question about Tosh and then I'm shat on. Tried my best to not talk to them after that. I had a girl lose her shit on me and my friend because for Halloween we wore suits and said we were the 1%. This was during the whole Occupy Wall Street crap. She got all upset and said we were FK'd up ourselves and that we were discriminatory, representing an oppressive regime. She was dressed as a 50s housewife. We told her that, based on her costume, she had no rights anyway and what us 1%ers did didn't concern her. And that we didn't understand why she was out of the kitchen. She stormed off pretty quick after that. Edit. A few people asked and I now realize this will add a little to the humor. This was at a house party and this exchange took place in the living room, giving her only one place to storm off to: the adjacent kitchen. 1. Father's Day. Apparently, celebrating it is offensive because men are worse parents. 2. There was an art exhibition here in Sweden where an African Swedish artist made a cake shaped like a classic stereotype of a black woman and asked the culture minister to cut it from down there while someone hidden under the table was screaming as if in pain, as a statement against gender mutilation. Shitstorm followed as people saw the pictures and didn't bother checking context, with loads of PPL demanding she resign and reported her for hate crimes and such, even after the context was widely explained. The National Afro-Swede Association kept demanding her resignation, saying that cutting a cake shaped like a black person no matter the context was enough and that she should be criminally charged. My female cousin stopped speaking to my sister and got people to bully her on Facebook because my sister doesn't like football and my cousin was excited that the NFL team in our state had made it to the Super Bowl. It turned into a huge Facebook war and all these random people were piling on my sister over it, simply because my sister wasn't excited about the NFL. BTW, this cousin is 46 years old and a teacher. I answered the phone at my pizza delivery job as Mickey Mouse one day. One guy got FCKing livid. He demanded to talk to the manager. She was standing right next to me trying not to laugh, saying I was making fun of his accent, Pakistan, and demanded I got fired. Manager told him she would fire me and gave him 50% off his order. No, she didn't fire me, and I delivered it to the guy. After seeing Captain America: Civil War at the cinema, some of us weren't too impressed by the film and were discussing it. One of our friends had thoroughly enjoyed it, decided that this was unacceptable. So with smile, he turned around and walked off without saying a word. He drove home without us, leaving us stranded at the Trafford Centre near Manchester, about 50 minutes from home, all because we disagreed with his assessment of a film. I was talking to a girl on an online dating app, and we were getting on really well, and we were gonna meet up at the weekend when we were free. Sometime before then we were talking about jokes, and so we decided to tell each other our absolute shittiest joke. Mine was, what's green and has wheels? Grass. I lied about the wheels. Double quote. It was at this point she got incredibly f***ing mad at me, going off on how if I'd easily lie about something like that, what's to stop you from lying about other things, and that she didn't want to date any more f***ing liars, etc. Needless to say, we didn't go on the date. In our corporate office there is no real dress code, and if there is, it's usually business casual. This bigger middle-aged woman saw a younger 20s girl wearing a nicer form-fitting outfit walk by and apparently offended her. She goes and looks for her boss and complains about this girl's outfit being provocative and actually managed to get the girl sent home without pay for the day. Again, I say that there wasn't a real rule against it, and the girl was probably a recent graduate and wanted to dress the part more than the others. Nobody but this one lady even noticed. She was just jealous that a younger girl could look better than her and had to be petty. I told a friend on Facebook that the creators of Cards Against Humanity were having an AMA here on Reddit. since she was really into the game. I thought she might want to ask them a question or something. The next thing I know is she got super pissed off that by saying that just because she was a female doesn't mean that she didn't know about it. She immediately removed me from her friends list and blocked me. All this for a simple "for your information." I work retail. We were having a sale on individual Sharpies. 25 cents each. There was a limit of 3 per customer, and because our registers track overrides we were told to be strict with the limits. A customer brought up 61 Sharpies and was furious I wouldn't sell them all to her at the sale price. I even offered to do 2 or 3 transactions for her but told her I couldn't do more than that because other people want Sharpies too. She then screamed that she was offended. She liked to color and needed them to color her project. My manager, having heard her screaming across the store, came up and told her she wasn't allowed any Sharpies because he didn't appreciate her having a temper tantrum in his store. I have never seen a person turn as red. In college I was an EMT. I was also involved with the campus interfaith organization. I started doing research on the different faiths that I interacted with. I learned that non-Mormons are not allowed in their temples. I then was wondering what happened in case of a medical emergency. That is when I found out that there are all Mormon EMS units in Salt Lake City to respond to anything within the temples. Apparently when I shared this discovery within a small group discussion I offend the 2 Mormons that were with us because it is apparently offensive for non-Mormons to talk about the temples. My brother once posted something on Facebook about the legalization of pot. Somehow the conversation turned into a discussion about gay marriage. I said something along the lines of "who cares if Adam marries Steve instead of Eve?" And this started a huge fight. He went on to say that he has always believed that my marriage would fail, still married 7 years tomorrow, and that because my husband was a different religion than he is, our families could never be friends. It tore the entire family apart. My brother went from being one of my best friends to never speaking to me, refusing to acknowledge me unless I was standing right in front of him, and actively trying to get me to divorce my husband. He called my husband one day and told him, "Hey bud, she was my sister before she was your wife," as if he has some sort of ownership over me or something. F***ing weird. I was the team leader of volunteers at a conference, and I was at the registration desk. A woman came to sign in and pick up her badge and schedule etc. and asked one of the volunteers a question. The volunteer didn't know the answer, so she looked at me and I gave the response. The lady flipped about how I was imposing myself and disrespecting the volunteer and ranting about how that's what men do. All because I was male and answered a question that was initially directed to a woman, despite said woman turning to me for the answer. Eventually she moved on, but I was told later by the volunteer, who was a good friend of mine, that the lady tracked her down to ransom more about how I walked all over her and she shouldn't let me do that and women need to put men like me in my place. It was surreal. She also interrupted a conference speaker for not addressing some pet cause of hers not at all related to his topic. And she got in an argument with a Jewish attendee who disagreed with her, so she said he was worse than Hitler. Was at the grocery store where a woman was blocking the aisle with her cart while she scanned the shelves. I said, "Excuse me," in a soft voice, figuring she didn't realize her cart was in the way. This usually works. She didn't react, so I figured she just hadn't heard me. So I said it again a little louder, regular speaking volume. She still didn't react. So I said it again louder, still not shouting at all, but making sure she could hear me. "Excuse me. I'm trying to get through." She turns to me and says, "How rude." At which point I just grabbed the end of her cart and moved it out of the middle of the aisle and said, "No. What's rude is blocking the aisle. I was being polite. You're being rude." And I just went about my shopping. When I was in 4th grade I was horsing around during some class free time. I had a coat hanger in my sweater with the hook poking out from my sleeve. I was doing the whole pirate eye thing and I say near the new girl, "Gar, I'm Captain Hook." She freaks out and demands I tell her why I just called her a hooker. I didn't even know what a hooker is and told her so. Apparently, that wasn't the right answer. Teacher got involved. Explained myself and apologized for the misunderstanding. Girl hated me after that. Received a complaint from an anonymous co-worker. Let's be honest. We all know who it is in every workplace, that I had used the outdated and racist term of collard greens to describe what my grandma made for Thanksgiving. Apparently, I was saying that because it's popular with colored people in the South. Never mind, it's because they come from the collard family of cabbages. So I was forced to apologize and call it spinach. Which it is f***ing not. Goddamn you Lois for making me spread misinformation. I have to ask to see ID when people buy any sort of high amount gift card where I work. Just policy. Go to do it for everyone. The amount of white people that think I'm passively saying they look like a criminal and say I'm discriminating against them. I'd have to ID a 12-year-old if they were buying $50 of Steam gift cards. Bucko. You're not that special. These are also the same people that get offended whenever I make sure a $50 or $100 bill is real. Like I don't care if you made it or just got it from the bank. Shit gets through the cracks sometimes. Go to check. My downhill neighbors took down the fence separating our yards because they said our yard was so beautiful. Then they complained that we were spying on them from our deck. Then we built a fence separating the yards again so we both had our privacy. Then they built a raised deck to see over the fence to our yard and complained again that we were spying on them. I got called out for manspreading at a transgender NB health conference here in town. My fiancé and I were alone at the table so I felt comfortable to spread my legs as necessary for my comfort. A woman passed by and said you shouldn't be manspreading. It's shitty and offensive. F***ing pardon me for sitting comfortably at a 6-seat table that's empty besides me and my fiancé. 10 years ago I was at a dance music festival in Serbia when I got talking to a really hot girl. She asked me what I thought about recent Serbian history. I was off my face on ecstasy so I said I didn't know much about it but, in general, I thought it was better if people didn't harbor old grudges and just tried to get along with each other in the present day. Honestly, it was so bland an answer a Miss America contestant gave have given it. But the girl stood up and stormed off like I'd just slapped in the face. It was a beautiful and unseasonably warm fall day on my college campus. High near 90 and humid. As I was walking towards the library I saw one of my former professors, interpersonal communications, walking towards me. She was wearing corduroy pants and a thick sweater with a scarf. I said, "Afternoon Dr. Robinson." Oh my gosh. It's way too warm a day for that sweater. I was planning on following up by asking if she had a cold classroom but she got right in my space and shook her finger in my face and snapped. "You have no right to tell me what I can and cannot wear. It is not your place to decide my clothing." I mumbled something incoherent and skulked away. A good friend of mine whom we'll call Mary expresses an inappropriate amount of anger towards anyone who uses the phrase rule of thumb. Most people don't know what it means. And it's little more than a colloquialism. Mary makes sure to angrily chastise people for using the term. Don't you know what rule of thumb means? It used to mean a man could beat a woman with a stick no bigger than his thumb. You shouldn't go around saying things like that. It's so rude. I've seen her do this several times. And it just embarrasses or flusters people. They don't mean it that way. But a melodramatic history lesson helps no one. My public speaking professor told our class this story at the beginning of the semester as a sample speech. He told us because the teacher in the story recently won her second Teacher of the Year award from the state. A college professor of American literature was teaching her class about backstory and exposition using the chapter in The Great Gatsby where Gatsby describes the story of how he became Jay Gatsby and wealthy. Just the one chapter and the students didn't even have to read the whole book. The following Monday, she shows up to her office in the morning and finds several students outside of her office with a petition signed by them and written in text message lingo, "You for you." etc. For her to resign from her job for making them read a chapter from The Great Gatsby that filled them with envy for the wealth of this fictional character and caused them mental stress. The woman took the petition and told them she would consider it. At the start of class, the teacher returned the paper to the students who wrote it with all of the grammar and punctuation corrected in red pen.